I'm Stacey Wilson-Hunt, your host for today's installment of Half Hour with Wilmore. And we are joined today by the EP, creator, and host of Peacock's Wilmore, Larry Wilmore, which makes sense because it's the name of your show.
Hey, Stacey, thank you so much.
So
I got lucky that I was able to host a show called Wilmore. How lucky. Yeah.
That is really great for brand recognition.
Yes,
Before we talk
absolutely.
about the series, I do want to cue up a clip, which I believe is from episode 1 of Wilmore, which aired last fall. So let's cue that up.
So here's what we're doing. For the next 11 weeks, we're here to have that conversation that America keeps saying it once, but so far has been a little chicken shit about, right? And we'll also hold your hand through the current craziness we call an election. Man, this has been an extraordinary year. And since the murder of George Floyd, I think a lot more people are attuned to the issues that communities of color have been talking about for years. I mean, it took a global pandemic, no sports, no concerts, and no more Tiger King for white people to finally have the bandwidth to be like, oh my God, did you see what's happening to black people? Yes, we did. So thanks, quarantine. Appreciate that.
Oh, I'd like to say that it doesn't feel as painfully raw as it did then, but it does.
Yes.
It all feels not a lot has changed. So first of all, I want to thank you for conceiving this series and centering it so wholly, and obviously the loss of George Floyd and the ensuing violence. And I think it was a really gutsy format and also something that we really needed. So thank you for doing that.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Stacey.
And on that front, I guess, when did you conceive this format? Was it born out of that terrible grief after May, when the impact of losing George Floyd had taken hold nationally in such a powerful way? And then tell me about conceiving it as this sort of election special over the course of 11 episodes.
Yeah, it's a great question. It seems hard to relate to now, but I felt like we were all in a collective stupor after that George Floyd thing, you know. Some people were at a loss of words, and some people were just at a loss of feeling, and we're just expressing. We were all out in the streets, you know, people were raw. There was all kinds of things going on. Dan Shear, who is head of Peacock over there, we were working together talking about some things, and he called me and asked if I wanted to like make a statement or something or say something. He didn't know, he was just asking if I felt like I needed to. I said, well, Dan, I don't know if that's appropriate, really. I don't really have a platform on Peacock. It'd be weird for me to just, it's not like I'm the president of Peacock, you know, and I'm making a statement. I said, I mean, I have a podcast, you know, and that's kind of my platform. And I certainly did something there. I did like a special like episode that really got shared a lot. And we talked about maybe doing like a one-off special or something like that, but we weren't quite sure. But we kept talking, and God bless Dan. He was really kind of adamant about wanting to have me not just as part of their platform, but back on television doing something. He was a big fan of what I did on the Nightly Show, and you know, was even a fan of my podcast and that type of stuff, called Black on the Air. If you
very catchy name, by the way.
Yes, exactly. But we figured out, well, maybe it might be good to do a limited series type of thing, like kind of address this. And I thought of, what if we use the election as kind of the framework, you know, and that way, because we didn't have any money, basically, we weren't like trying to pitch this new show and go through that whole process. We were trying to get something on the air right away.
Also, it's during a pandemic. You have COVID concerns, production-wise, all of that, right?
All of those things. And it started, the original thought was like, maybe you could do it from your living room, you know, Zoom call. And I said, well, I don't know about that, because I don't want it to feel like it's pandemic, you know. And so I thought we really should try to be on a set. I want to acknowledge quarantine, but I don't want it to feel like it. Like, I want to acknowledge it, you know?
Right.
And so the idea kind of started forming out of that. But the basic idea was to get in a conversation with America. The first name that we had for it was going to be called Uncomfortable with Larry Wilmore.
Which I think would still have worked. Yeah. For sure.
Yes, exactly. But I think somebody had used the name Uncomfortable or something and it didn't quite work. But we liked that for a long time. And we thought that'd be nice for them to promote. You know, you want to get uncomfortable with Larry Wilmore? No, Larry, that's not a good. But also,
I mean, let's face it. At that point, at really any point in 2020, everything was uncomfortable. So that was implied. So there was no implication of comfort at all, anyway. So.
Exactly. And one thing that I felt would be good to do is to, and Dan also, have a mix of good conversation with people, but
Mhm.
also me kind of weighing in on the issue of the day, but also something real light and funny that we could leave people with. So it doesn't feel like it's a down thing either, you know? So we felt like the combination of all that could be a fun type of thing. And it turned out that was the pretty much the format of the show. You know?
Now it's interesting at the time when you were watching all of these shows and commentators
Yeah.
and late night shows try to pivot and cover this stuff in a way that was informed. And again, no Black hosts on the air really on the main late night shows, so that you could see them struggling. That how do I deliver these messages? How do I
Right.
react? What did you see as the void that you could fill outside of your obvious excellence at these types of commentaries? But what was the messaging that you saw missing in all of the rest of those programs?
Well, I appreciate that, Stacey. But the thing that I didn't want to do, ironically, it was to not compete in that arena,
Okay.
and I wanted to be just a separate arena because if I tried to compete in that, I felt like, nah, I don't want to be alongside that. I don't think it's the right area. We should create a different space. And that's why I didn't wear a suit on purpose. You
Okay.
know, I
You
was
get to
very
drop a
casual.
lot of F-bombs and expletives, which is really fun.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. You know, the format on purpose was conversational.
Mm.
You know, I didn't want it presentational, like it was going to be joke, joke, joke. I wanted it to feel like we were in a conversation. It was actually patterned more after the podcast
Mhm. I
in
could see
terms of
that. Mhm.
feeling like I just dropped in on people and we're talking about this thing, you know, and even the guest part of it, making sure that it really felt like that they weren't interviews, that there were conversations about it, you
Right,
know.
and that comes
And
across. You're not asking them to promo their new project, God
exactly.
forbid.
That's
They're
exactly right. You know,
You're
I think
asking smart people who have smart things to say, who maybe
exactly right.
also happen to be actors or happen to be activists. And I really appreciated that, because I mean, after a while, that sort of promo fatigue
Yeah.
with the late night shows, and it's no one's fault. It's just sort of the
That's
structure.
how the machine is built. And
Right.
so we wanted to avoid that. And so you're absolutely right. So we patterned the show based on themes. So like we
Right.
said, let's do one on disinformation. Let's do one on
Gotcha.
protest. Let's
Right.
let's do one on that. So we came up with what's the title of the show, and we'll work the show around it. One show was landscape was that off of purpose because he said that. We said, well, that's the theme of our show, you know.
Right.
One of my favorite ones was on the media with Soledad O'Brien and Bradley Whitford.
Love her interview. That was great.
She was fantastic. And I thought, boy, I love this format because it doesn't have to be so much about them or this. It's about this thing that we all can talk about and weigh in on and
Hmm.
have different perspectives. And Brad Whitford, of course, was fantastic also with
He's
his
wonderful.
perspective on things. So I found it kind of liberating, Stacey, to do interviews in that way where we're not talking about our stuff. You know, we're
Mm.
talking about what's out there. So that
Well,
was fun.
and I could sense a discomfort right away among Hollywood folks of even talking about what,
Yes,
anything that would seem ancillary or silly during that time. I think a lot of
right.
talent were uncomfortable promoting things or talking about a movie. They just all wanted to say something important in the right context. So I think you
Right.
gave them that platform really well.
Yeah, and it was fun to also do the comedy part of it too. Like I think it was the first one with Amber, I believe, but you know,
Mhm.
my memory could be faulty. But like, you know, we would play the lightning round of, okay, is this reparations or is this looting? You know, and we're still using the same content, but we're doing it in a different way. So we're not just doing fun where we ignored that, we're doing fun where we're acknowledging that, you know.
Right. And that balance too. And then she's also great at that too, where she can
Oh,
talk
she was
about
great.
really heavy stuff and pivot really quickly to
Exactly.
a
Right.
lighthearted moment. And I'm wondering, the name of the show is Wilmore. It's all you. It's not being filtered through a
Right.
nightly show writers
That's right.
team or the daily show writers team. How much pressure did you feel? I mean, this really does feel like theater to me, almost like an 11-part one-man show in a lot of
Yeah.
ways. That sort of stripped down production design, and you in your chair with very sharp clothes, I must say. You look very sharp.
Yeah. Thank you.
But did you feel nervous about having this eponymous show that was just all you all the
Yeah.
time?
You know what? It's funny. I felt the opposite. Because we didn't have an audience, it allowed us to relax in a certain way.
Hmm.
And my partner in crime is Joe Miller, and I worked with Joe initially at the Daily Show when I was senior Black correspondent,
Yes.
and we worked on a lot of those pieces together.
Mhm.
And we had like two other writers, Trayvon Free and Chloe Hilliard, and Trayvon wrote some of those too, and we worked together. So there was a real feeling of this is our home team back together again,
Right.
and so the monologues and everything, it was like you and me talking right now, Stacey. It was
Mhm.
just us jamming and talking about it, and me and Joe, like me making Joe laugh late at night, and just thinking, oh, this is what we need to do, and put it on the page. So when I was doing it, I wasn't nervous at all because we
Mm,
weren't doing it for that reaction. Like, let's hope this joke works. It wasn't that at all.
right.
It's like, what's the point that we're trying to get to in this? And let's try to make that point as good as we can with maybe some fun here and that type of thing.
Hmm. No, and it's funny. A lot of actors I speak to who are used to multicams who then go to single cam comedies,
Yeah,
they mourn the loss of that immediate laugh
yeah,
because they're so used to the like sort of the mechanics of comedy being, I say this and you react.
yeah.
So it does seem to provide this freedom, and now that you talk about it, that it's probably felt very refreshing.
It was the other way around,
Yeah,
ironically,
yeah.
because sometimes in this arena, this happened on the nightly show. Like we would love this point that we made, and we do it, and in rehearsal maybe didn't get quite the laugh, and so then we'd want to change it. But it's like, but it was the right point,
Right, right,
And
right,
here we weren't beholden to have to get that laugh. It's like it's okay if it doesn't get a big laugh. We're
right.
not measuring it based on the types of laughs. We're measuring it based on, is it making the point? Is it clever? Are we doing this and that, shaking it up a little bit? I did one of my favorite things was it was really just kind of a drive-by
Hmm.
where I was making fun of Ice Cube for just doing his platinum plan. And I just, I just mama in the kitchen with the platinum, mama in the kitchen with the platinum plan. And I was just riffing on that, and we were laughing so hard I could barely get through it. It was so much fun.
Well, that's what's also fun to see you. There are some awkward silences where we see you reacting to your own joke and then laughing at it, and then there's just silence, and then we're all like, okay, I guess we're waiting to the commercial.
Right.
It's fun watching you riff on what you've just said and then sort of, kind of vamp for a minute, which I thought was really entertaining.
Yeah, breaking up that rhythm,
Mhm.
of the expectation of how we should perform in this space. And I think it may have changed, not that my show did this, but I think COVID may have changed a lot. I mean, Colbert looks very comfortable in the format that he has
Oh,
now with
totally
his
does. Mhm.
his his relaxed shirt. I kind of like him like that. I mean,
Me too.
because the bottom line is Steven's a very funny, intelligent guy. He really doesn't need a lot of other things,
No,
ironically.
no.
Put him just in the arena and he's fantastic. Even Trevor, in Daily Show, he looks great in that relaxed
He
format.
seems to really have thrived in that
Yeah.
in that format for sure. But we don't want to talk about him. He's your competition.
Eh, eh.
So I've always wanted to ask you, your
See,
tagline.
this is my generosity of spirit here. See, that's why people should be voting for our show.
You're his elder, damn it.
Yes, that's right.
You've always talked about keeping it 100.
Right.
And even a little emoticon in our iPhones that has a little 100
That's
with a
right.
slash underneath. But I wonder, what does that mean to you today? And what does that mean to you in this format? And there was one thing you said in the show that I really loved, where you criticized liberals when they got upset that Obama talked about not liking defund the police, which I completely agree with. And you said it's a terrible slogan.
Right.
And,
Right.
and then, but then in that same moment, you anticipate the liberal reaction. You sort of act it all out in real time, and it's so exactly what happens every 5 minutes on Twitter.
I know. I
So
know.
is that what keeping it 100 means to you, where it's sort of equal opportunity skewering of ridiculous people? I mean, is that really sort of what that means?
Well, not quite that. It really means that your first adherence is to the truth,
Okay.
not to a side and not even to your opinion. Like
Mhm.
I used to say, I called myself a passionate centrist, and I said that's not a political assignation. It really means half the time I disagree with myself. Like if
I like
the yeah, if the truth is different than my opinion, sorry opinion,
that. Right.
I gotta go with the truth. And that's happened to me many times.
Right.
Um, and one thing that I love to do, and I've always loved, I love taking two sides of something, but arguing them equally.
Hmm.
So you don't even know what side I'm on. I remember Joe and I got into it once. She said, "Well, are you arguing that?" I said, "No, Joe, I'm creating an argument so we could get to something."
Right.
I
Right.
said, "Who cares whether I believe it or not? It's still a good argument." So for me, all can be in our bubbles. I happen to be in the left, and I completely acknowledge it's so easy for me to be in that liberal bubble
Sure.
and not look at the other side. So it's on me to make sure that I'm not doing that and look at it for what it is. And and I also enjoy it as well because I like to mine what the truth is. I watch everything from all different points of view as much as I can because I want to hear how people are framing things.
Right.
I like to make up my own mind as well.
Well, you also want to see how it's been so possible for the other side, and I'm on your side. I happen to also be leaning, but also a thoughtful centrist. But just seeing how has the right and Fox News and those entities been able to make such convincing arguments to people?
Yeah,
What is their vernacular? So I think it's interesting to look at both sides and the languages that we use.
that's
I mean,
right.
it's really alternate realities. If you go to Fox versus CNN and you cover their breaking news,
Yeah,
it's like different planets. And I think that's what
absolutely.
we have to be able to do is acknowledge that. Yeah.
I couldn't agree more. I came up with the word because I love coming up with the words because I'm nerdy with the words. Years ago, it was called primo simp jurius. And
Oh,
what
I
it
like that.
means in the Latin, it means first Simpson jury. And what that means is that making a decision where your agenda is more important than the truth.
Right.
And anytime your agenda is more important than the truth, you're operating within that bubble. And what happens is, I actually talked about this in my podcast last week, and I was talking about how many times Trump, like I would say, many times Trump isn't wrong. He's just so far from right. And I talked about what that means is that many times a person isn't really lying. Lying can be very binary. It's either the truth or a lie. So what's going on when people believe like a big lie, like what Trump says? And I talked about the nature of what a deception is and how deception occurs. And this idea called paltering, how you can use parts of the truth to build a deception,
Mm,
actually. you know, and many people get caught up in things because they're believing the little truths, not knowing that's a paper mache for this false idol that's over there.
right. And we saw him do that time and time again with something like immigration, which
Absolutely.
we have a broken immigration system. That's a fact.
Correct.
But then he
Correct.
would he would pick the most inflammatory elements of that, and then
Exactly.
that becomes the argument. And I think that's where it becomes destructive, if I'm understanding you.
He was not wrong,
He
but
was
he
not
was far
wrong.
from right. Yes.
And his tactics were far from helpful. We'll just say that.
I agree. I agree. And I also feel that happens on the left as well. Many
Absolutely.
times it happens with the policing of language or that type of thing, where people can
Yes.
go overboard. They're not wrong, but they're just far from right with it.
That's so true. I like that distinction a lot. I'll never forget right before Trump was elected, I interviewed Conan O'Brien, who said, jokingly, but not jokingly, oh, all the late night hosts, we're just praying that he gets elected because it's just nonstop material for 4 years, right?
Uh-huh.
You don't even have to try. I mean, the stuff's writing itself. So now that everything's been fixed, wink, wink, what what does it look like for someone like you, as someone who's commenting on America, to have a new administration who there's really nothing funny about Joe Biden. We can make fun of his age or his gaffes, and Kamala is not terribly funny either. She's very accomplished, classy person. So how do we find the jokes moving forward? Is it because the system is still broken?
Well, Trump was such an aberration. It's
Right.
hard to compare anything that Roy Wood, who's on the Daily Show, really funny guy, he was on my show. He just tweeted something out where he said, thinking that Trump is good for comedy is thinking like food poisoning is good for losing weight. It's like, yes, you can lose weight through being poisoned by food, but it is not ideal.
Right.
One
Right.
does not need Trump for political comedy. Mark Twain was doing political comedy 100 years ago. I,
Very true.
I started doing senior Black correspondent in 2006, and it was during the Obama years that my show first came on, and there's plenty to make fun of. There's plenty of things out there that you can scare and make fun of. We just don't have this overbearing narcissistic figure hogging all the oxygen as the center of it, which is fine. We don't need that to make comedy. I'd rather he be gone and me be challenged. How about that?
Yes. And you have to put in an extra hour of work if he's gone. Yes, I understand. And it's interesting going back and watching some of those earlier episodes. It feels like we're watching events that had unfolded years ago.
Mhm.
It feels so fresh and raw, but also just watching the election coverage that
Yeah.
which was literally just a few months ago. How do you see the show kind of being this marker of time and place as evergreen, but also as something that really was crisis mode? You know what I'm saying?
Oh man, no, it's a great question. It's something we thought of when we were making it because due to the nature of how we produced it, we had to make the show slightly evergreen, but also in the moment. So we couldn't make it topical. It had to be current,
Right.
is what it was.
Right.
And I was hoping that some of the conversations we had outside of talking specifically about the horse race of the election would have a little more evergreen currency as well. Like when we
Sure.
talked about the media, or we talk about race relations, or we talk about disinformation, and some of these things, they have a little more evergreen currency to them, But it is interesting. I agree. It feels almost like 5 years ago. I was
It really does.
looking a little at the first episode because we've lost. Time has. They're going to have to get some scientists to figure out what happened with time this past year because
No.
it's done something differently. Um, but yeah, I'm hoping you could maybe even a year from now see some of the conversations and still find them interesting and not dated, even though the content of the show itself would be dated.
Right. And if people haven't seen the show and they may think, oh, it's already passed, I already know everything that happened. I read the New York Times. I'm a savvy consumer.
Yes.
What do you think that people can learn, even just going back to this very recent history, about the impact of George Floyd, about the election,
Yeah.
which this drama is going to continue for a long time, even after the inauguration takes hold.
Yes.
So what is the function for you, for someone who sees himself as very educated and up on events? What is the value of watching it?
Um, I see myself as pretty silly, actually. That's a great question. Now that I think about it, it might be fun to binge the episodes now, almost like as an archive of that period, and to follow those openings and how I was tracking what was going on. I realized I got a few things right and I got a few things wrong, and it was fun to kind of think about that. And
What did you get wrong?
oh man, what did I get wrong? Probably, I think a few things of what might be important, but I think in the very first episode or the second one, I felt that the military thing would hurt Trump in the end, and I still feel that it did. I feel that
I think it did too.
I feel that enough Republicans stayed home, particularly when Cindy McCain came out and just kind of, she is a stalwart of the Republican Party, and for her to come out against Trump, and he was so stupid to treat John McCain the way that he did. I do think that it made a difference. So I feel I was right about that,
I think you were. And we can't really measure that in hindsight, but I have a feeling that was a slow build towards something pretty meaningful.
Yeah, and I do feel also that this was what I call a cynical election. These are my own definitions. A cynical election is when you're voting against something more than voting for something, and this is one of those cynical elections where the person going against somebody actually won, but it rarely happens. Reagan kind of beat Carter in a cynical election. Clinton kind of beat Bush in that. It's very difficult, to run against something,
Very true. And maybe it was just a temporary sort of putting our finger in the dam and say, okay, next time we'll have a better playing field, but for now, let's just repair.
And I tell you, Stacey, it's amazing to me because I predicted Trump was going to win a year ago based on the economy and everything. All he had to do was be a decent leader of COVID. Just act like you care about it. And he would yes, and he would have won the election, honestly, from a pure political standpoint. And here's a guy who's supposed to be a business guy. This should have been in his wheelhouse. Like, could you imagine if Mitt Romney, another Republican, was in charge? It would have been completely different. Just the way he handled the Olympics, was masterful compared to this, but that's what we expect from business people, not even Republican or Democrat. When we think business people, well, yeah, you want somebody who knows how to run things to be running something. And his dereliction of duty, just to be absent from that, is astonishing to me.
Well, it's also interesting. We were all so raw and just in need of just any show of decency from anyone in that time.
Absolutely.
Lost a loved one. And I think you're right. Had he just shown a glimmer of empathy?
Any of that, because no matter what you say, there's a lot of crazy people in this country and everything, but the American people are very forgiving. They really are, They know when something is really your fault and not. And I'm talking about as a group. And it takes a lot for them to kick the person out who's in charge. Really, Trump had to do so much to get kicked out. It really is amazing when you think about it, And he did. He succeeded. He's the most successful president at succeeding and getting kicked out.
Well, he really will go down in history for a lot of very colorful reasons.
He's got to be tired of winning at this point.
It's the Charlie Sheen version of winning. So much winning, right?
Yes, all that tiger blood or whatever.
Simpler times those were.
Mm-hmm.
And then finally, can you see yourself doing something like this again, kind of, intermittently as the feelings and passions may arise in you to do so? Because you've sort of proven this format works. You're comfortable with it. You're good at it.
Yeah.
It's just sort of like a recurring, moment of Wilmore as the times call for it.
Absolutely. I would love to. I have a great relationship with people at Universal and Peacock and those people. And we've talked about doing that type of thing. Maybe it'll be on for politics or for culture. I mean, who knows? The midterms will be here before we know it. We could do something special for that. I like, a lot. I got so much love online. And by the way, thanks to so many people who say, no, Peacock, bring Wilmore back. I'm like, you guys, it was a special and I'm happy with that. I'm fine with that. I'm happy that they did it. But it would be fun to come back and do things in little spurts because I really don't need to do the full-on show. I don't really have the time to do that. I'm doing so many other projects and stuff, as you know.
Yes, it's true. You're a very prolific, very busy person.
And I love doing all those things, So I feel very fortunate that I can have a platform like Peacock to do something. How much fun was that to do something fun like that,
Right, and to drop all those F-bombs without a care in the world.
Can I drop it in this interview? Or no?
I can't tell you what to do. You have to use your internal guide on that.
No, I won't. I'll just say, please, if you haven't seen Wilmore and Peacock, please watch it, vote for us. And we just had so much fun doing it. I hope it gets the recognition that all the people who worked in it deserve. So.
I agree. And congratulations and thank you to you and Peacock for being available today. And we hope wherever people are watching this from their couch, their office, please stay safe, wear a mask, and be nice to people because
please.
We have a whole new year ahead of us. And I think it can only get better from here.
Yes. If you're going to be involved in insurrection, just be nice. Nice. You
There
can do an
nice
insurrection in a nice way. It's possible.
Thank you, Larry.
Thanks, Stacey. Appreciate it.